Hey there. So you wanted to do a deep dive on brief cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this stack of materials is
It's a lot.
it's a gold mine, really. So
Yeah.
knowing your interest in practical psychology and self-improvement, I think this is really going to be right up your alley.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really fascinating because we're talking about not just the theory here, but we're also talking about how it's used in practice
Right.
by therapists. So there's some real gems in here.
Yeah, I'm seeing that all
Thank
the
you for somebody who's not in the field.
We've got the Handbook of Brief Cognitive Behavior Therapy as our base camp.
Yeah.
And then we've got all these studies on thought suppression and anger and workplace stress.
Yeah.
Brief CBT seems to pop up in the most unexpected places.
It does. And what I think is so fascinating about it is how adaptable it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
the core idea is about creating positive changes in thoughts and behaviors,
Right.
but in a more focused, time-limited way than traditional therapy.
Yeah. Okay, so how is it different from the standard approach? What makes it brief?
Well, I think one of the key differences is the type of issues that is best suited for.
Okay.
So, specific phobias, for example, are incredibly well suited to brief CBT.
Okay.
You can see dramatic improvements, in a handful of sessions.
Wow.
More complex conditions, like depression or GAD, generalized anxiety disorder,
Yeah.
often benefit from a longer-term approach.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm also seeing a lot about, assigning the outcome.
Yeah.
It's not always about eliminating symptoms right away, is it?
Yeah, that can be surprising. But, success in brief CBT isn't always about immediate symptom reduction.
Okay.
Sometimes it's more about equipping somebody with coping skills
Right?
that will serve them in the long run.
I see.
It's sort of like, learning to navigate rough waters.
Yeah,
The goal isn't to make the sea calm, but it's to become a skilled sailor.
I like that analogy. And speaking of rough waters, I'm seeing some really intriguing research here on thought suppression,
Yeah.
especially its link to depression. Trying to not think about something
Right.
can actually make it worse.
It's ironic, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, especially for those already struggling with depression. Thought suppression can actually amplify negative thoughts.
Right.
It's like trying not to think about a pink elephant.
Yeah.
Suddenly all you can see are pink elephants.
Exactly. It's like our minds have a mind of their own sometimes.
Exactly.
So if battling those thoughts isn't the answer, what is?
Well, that's where acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, comes in.
Okay.
And it's a type of CBT that takes a radically different approach.
Okay.
Instead of fighting those unwanted thoughts, ACT encourages acceptance
Okay.
as part of the human experience.
I see.
You're not trying to eliminate them, but to change your relationship with them.
Okay, that's a shift in perspective. Can you give me an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. So imagine you're feeling anxious about an upcoming presentation.
Right.
Instead of trying to push away the anxiety, ACT would encourage you to acknowledge it.
Okay.
Maybe even say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. That makes sense given the situation, but it doesn't mean I can't do this.
So it's about recognizing the feeling without letting it dictate your actions.
Exactly.
Almost like acknowledging a wave without letting it knock you over.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that those thoughts and feelings are often uncontrollable. And by trying to control them, you end up feeling more out of control.
Right.
Willingness in this context means taking action that aligns with your values, even when those difficult thoughts and feelings are present.
That's such a powerful concept, and it seems like this approach could be helpful in all sorts of situations, not just clinical settings.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think we tend to think of CBT in terms of mental health conditions,
Right.
but its applications go far beyond. And there's a fascinating study from Bond and Bunce back in 2000
Yeah.
that I think really highlights this. They used a brief group-based CBT intervention to address workplace stress.
Workplace stress. Now, that's something almost everyone can relate to.
Yeah, for sure.
What did they find?
They found significant improvements, not only in the employees' mental well-being,
Wow.
but also in their effectiveness at work.
That's amazing.
And the mechanism behind these improvements was increased psychological acceptance.
So it's not just about managing symptoms, it's about building resilience and a healthier mindset
Precisely.
for everyday life.
Whether it's dealing with stress at work, navigating relationship challenges, or even overcoming performance anxiety,
Right.
the principles of CBT can be incredibly valuable.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that can feel a bit heated, anger management.
Yeah.
I'm noticing some really specific details here about how anger is measured and addressed
Yeah.
in these materials.
Well, I think what's important is recognizing that anger can manifest in different ways.
Right?
So we're talking frequency, intensity, duration, and even the way it's expressed.
Right.
These are all critical parameters for understanding and addressing anger issues.
And one thing that jumped out at me was that while the intensity of anger tends to decrease with age,
Yes.
there might be gender differences
Yeah.
in how anger is experienced and expressed.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting nuance.
It is. And I think one thing we can't overlook is the role of comorbidity.
Right.
Anger often occurs alongside other mental health conditions.
I see.
So brief CBT for anger management is usually an adjunct treatment working in conjunction with other therapies,
Okay.
not a standalone solution.
So it's about understanding anger within the context of a person's overall well-being.
Exactly.
It's not just about learning to control outbursts,
Right.
but addressing the underlying factors as well.
Exactly. Now let's turn to social phobia, another area where CBT can be incredibly effective.
Okay.
And it's more than just feeling shy or uncomfortable in social situations.
Right.
It's about understanding the thoughts and behaviors that maintain that fear.
I'm seeing that emphasized in the materials as well. It's not just about the feeling of anxiety, but the underlying beliefs.
Right. And behaviors that keep it alive.
Exactly. And those can be very subtle.
Can you give an example of those safety behaviors that often come up?
Sure. So imagine someone with social phobia at a party.
Okay.
They might avoid eye contact,
Right.
stick close to people they know, or rehearse what they're going to say. Before speaking, these are all ways of trying to minimize the perceived threat.
I see.
But they can actually reinforce the fear in the long run.
It's almost like they're inadvertently confirming their fears by avoiding any chance to disprove them.
Exactly. And that's where CBT comes in.
Right.
It helps individuals identify and challenge those negative thoughts and behaviors.
Okay.
It encourages them to test out those beliefs in real life.
Okay.
Drop those safety behaviors and see what happens.
So it's about facing those fears head on, but in a structured and supportive way.
Precisely. Now let's move on to addiction. And I'm seeing a lot here about brief interventions
Okay.
and the stages of change model.
The stages of change, that's the idea that people move through different phases
Yes.
on their path to recovery, right?
Exactly.
Can you walk me through those stages?
Sure. It starts with pre-contemplation,
Yeah.
where someone might not even recognize they have a problem.
Right.
Then comes contemplation, where they start thinking about change but might be ambivalent.
Okay.
Preparation is the stage where they're getting ready to take action,
Right.
followed by the action stage where they're actively making changes, and finally there's maintenance,
Right.
where the focus is on sustaining those changes over time.
It's like a journey with distinct milestones along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm seeing motivational interviewing mentioned as a technique for supporting people through those stages.
Yeah, and motivational interviewing is all about helping people explore their own ambivalence about change.
Okay.
It's not about forcing someone into a decision, but guiding them toward making choices that align with their own values and goals.
Right.
It's a very empowering approach.
I can see how that would be particularly helpful in dealing with addiction, where motivation and personal commitment are so crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's talk about relationships. There's a section here on brief cognitive behavioral couple therapy, or CBCT.
Yes.
Is this something that could be helpful even for couples who aren't necessarily in crisis?
Absolutely.
Okay.
CBCT focuses on both individual histories and current relationship dynamics.
I see.
It's about understanding how past experiences and current patterns of interaction might be contributing to difficulties.
Right.
It's helpful for anyone looking to improve their relationship, not just those in crisis.
I'm seeing the terms primary distress and secondary distress here.
Yes.
Can you explain those a little more?
Sure. So primary distress is the initial problem that brings a couple into therapy.
Okay.
So for example, in the case of Michael and Denise from the Handbook, their primary distress was a lack of quality time together
Right.
due to their demanding careers.
Okay. And secondary distress is?
Secondary distress emerges from the ways couples try to cope with that primary distress.
Okay.
So in Michael and Denise's case, they started criticizing each other,
Right.
blaming each other for their lack of time together.
Right.
Their arguments became more frequent and intense,
Right.
creating even more distance between them.
So those negative coping mechanisms actually worsen the situation.
Exactly. And CBCT helps couples recognize and interrupt those destructive patterns.
Okay.
It encourages them to communicate more effectively, challenge those negative attributions they hold about each other,
I see.
and ultimately build a stronger, more fulfilling relationship.
That makes sense. Now, how about applying CBT to younger minds? I'm
Right.
really curious how these principles are adapted for children and adolescents.
Yeah.
Is it just a watered-down version of adult therapy?
Not at all.
Okay.
While the underlying principles are the same, the techniques are often more engaging and interactive. Think mood tracking forms, reward systems, even games designed to teach them about their emotions and how to manage them.
Right.
It's all about making it fun and accessible.
That makes sense. Kids learn best when they're actively involved. Can you give me some examples of specific techniques that stand out?
Sure. So one powerful technique is called reframing.
Okay.
It's about helping parents see their child's challenging behaviors in a new light.
Oh, okay.
For instance, let's say a child is constantly screaming at his sister,
Right.
instead of viewing it as simply bad behavior.
Yeah.
Reframing might involve understanding that the child is struggling to communicate his needs effectively
Right.
and needs guidance on how to do so in a more appropriate way.
So it's about looking beyond the surface behavior and understanding the underlying needs.
Exactly. Another technique is called relabeling,
Okay.
which is about replacing negative labels for a child's behavior with more optimistic ones.
Right.
For example, instead of saying a child is lazy for not doing their homework, you might relabel it as the child being tired and needing a break or some extra support to get started.
That's a great way to shift the focus from criticism to understanding and support.
Exactly.
What about mood tracking forms and reward systems? I can see how those would be engaging for kids.
Yeah, mood tracking forms can be a powerful tool for helping children become more aware of their emotions and what triggers them.
Right.
It might involve drawing faces to represent different moods,
Okay.
using colors or a scale to rate their intensity.
I see.
Reward systems are great for motivating children to practice new, positive behaviors.
It's about making it tangible and giving them a sense of ownership over their emotional well-being.
Exactly. And these are just a few examples of the many ways CBT can be adapted to meet the unique needs of children and adolescents.
This is also fascinating. We've covered so much ground already, from the core principles of brief CBT
Okay.
to its diverse applications and everything from anxiety and anger to addiction, relationships, and even parenting. It's clear that this approach can be used to address a wide range of challenges
It is.
across the lifespan.
It's a truly versatile approach.
Yeah.
And I think what's most exciting is that it gives people the tools to understand their own thoughts and behaviors
Right.
and ultimately make positive changes.
It's about empowering people to become their own best therapists, in a way.
Yeah, I love that.
Welcome back. I'm still buzzing from all the amazing insights we uncovered about brief CBT.
Yeah.
One thing that keeps coming up for me is its focus on the here and now.
Right.
It's not about, digging into your childhood or
Yeah.
spending years analyzing the past.
Exactly.
Brief CBT is very much present focused.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors
Yeah.
are all intertwined in this very moment
Yeah.
and what you can do to shift them in a positive direction.
Exactly. And that's where I think the behavioral part of CBT
Right.
really shines.
Okay.
It's about experimenting with new ways of thinking and behaving, seeing what works,
Right.
and adjusting your approach as needed.
It's like you become a scientist
Yeah.
in your own life, testing hypotheses and gathering data.
I love that analogy. And I think one of the key tools in that scientific approach is self-monitoring.
Oh, self-monitoring.
Yeah.
Isn't that basically about paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors?
Yes. But
Yeah.
it's more than just noticing them. It's about tracking them over time,
Okay.
looking for patterns and identifying triggers.
Right.
It's about becoming a keen observer of your own inner world.
So, for example, if you're working on managing anger, you might keep a journal where you record each time you feel angry, what happened before you felt angry, and how you responded.
Precisely. And by doing that, you might start to notice that certain situations or people tend to trigger your anger,
Yeah.
or that you tend to respond in ways that actually make things worse.
It's like shining a light on those automatic reactions
Yeah.
that we often aren't even aware of.
Totally.
And once you've identified those patterns, you can start to develop strategies for interrupting them and choosing a different path.
That's the power of self-monitoring. It gives you the information you need to make targeted, effective changes.
Right.
It takes you from feeling like you're at the mercy of your emotions
Yeah.
to feeling like you have some agency.
That's so empowering. Now, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, acceptance.
Yeah.
I understand the concept in theory,
Yeah.
but it can still be hard to wrap my head around it. Like, how can accepting those negative thoughts and feelings actually be helpful?
Yeah.
It feels almost counterintuitive.
It's a common question, and I think it's important to remember that acceptance doesn't mean liking or approving of those thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
It's not about giving up or resigning yourself to feeling bad.
So it's not about saying, oh, well, this is just how I am. There's nothing I can do about it.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging those thoughts and feelings as part
Yes.
of your experience without letting them control you.
Right.
It's about creating some space between you and those thoughts and feelings so you can choose how to respond.
So if you're feeling anxious about a presentation, acceptance might involve saying to yourself, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. That's understandable given the situation, but it doesn't mean I can't do this.
Exactly. And the research actually suggests that this kind of acceptance can reduce the intensity of those negative emotions because you're no longer fighting them.
Okay.
It's like when you try to hold a beach ball underwater, the more you push it down, the more forcefully it springs back up.
That's such a great analogy. It really highlights that struggle we often have with those unwanted thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, and when you resist those thoughts and feelings, you're actually giving them more energy and attention.
Yeah.
But when you accept them, they tend to lose their grip on you.
It's like learning to ride the waves of your emotions instead of being tossed around by them.
I love that metaphor. It's
Yeah.
about finding that sense of balance and stability even when things are rough.
This is all making so much more sense now. Okay, I'm curious about how CBT approaches relaxation.
Okay.
Is it just about taking deep breaths and trying to calm down?
Well, it can involve techniques like deep breathing, but it goes deeper than that.
Okay.
CBT recognizes that our bodies and minds are interconnected. So when we're stressed, our bodies tend to tense up,
Right.
and that physical tension can actually increase our feelings of anxiety.
It's like a vicious cycle where the mind and body feed off each other's stress.
Exactly. So CBT relaxation techniques often focus on releasing that physical tension, which can then have a calming effect on our minds.
So what are some examples of those techniques?
One that you probably heard of is progressive muscle relaxation,
Okay.
which involves systematically tensing and releasing different muscle groups in your body.
Yeah.
It helps you become more aware of where you're holding tension and how to let it go.
I've tried that before, and it's amazing how much tension you can hold in your body without even realizing it.
It's true. And by consciously releasing that tension, you're sending a signal to your body and mind that it's okay to relax.
And that can make it so much easier to cope with those stressful situations.
Right.
What about other techniques?
Another powerful technique is guided imagery, which involves using your imagination to create a sense of peace and relaxation. It might involve picturing yourself on a beach, in a forest, or any other place that brings you a sense of calm.
It's like creating a mental escape hatch.
Yeah.
A place you can go to when things feel overwhelming.
Exactly. And by focusing on those peaceful images and sensations, you can shift your attention away from the stress and anxiety you might be feeling.
I can see how that would be helpful for so many people. And are there actual physiological benefits to these techniques?
Absolutely. Research has shown that these techniques can lower your heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension.
Wow.
They're not just about feeling better mentally, they're actually having a real impact on your body.
That's fascinating. So
Yeah.
it's really about tapping into that mind-body connection and using it to our advantage.
Precisely, and that's why relaxation techniques are often an important part of CBT treatment for a wide range of conditions, including anxiety, depression, and even chronic pain.
Okay, now I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people struggle with, worry. It seems like our minds are wired to worry,
Yeah.
especially when we're facing uncertainty or challenges. It can feel like a constant companion.
Worry is a natural human response. It's part of how we try to anticipate and prepare for potential problems.
Right.
It's a survival mechanism that's served us well for centuries.
But I'm guessing it's about finding that sweet spot between healthy, productive worry and the kind that keeps us up at night and paralyzes us with fear.
Exactly, and that's where CBT can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
It starts with understanding the difference between productive worry and unproductive worry.
Okay, what's the difference?
So productive worry is when we're thinking about a problem in a constructive way, trying to come up with solutions and taking steps to address the situation.
Right.
It's like focused problem solving,
So it's about taking action rather than getting stuck in a loop of what ifs.
right? Unproductive worry, on the other hand, is when we're just spinning our wheels, going over the same negative thoughts again and again without actually taking any action. It's like a hamster on a wheel, going nowhere fast.
And that kind of worry can be incredibly draining and debilitating.
Yeah.
It can make you feel powerless.
Exactly. So CBT helps people identify those unproductive worry patterns and develop strategies for breaking free from them.
So what are some examples of those strategies? I'm eager to hear how to break free from that worry cycle.
So one effective technique is called worry postponement, which involves setting aside a specific time each day to worry.
So it's like giving yourself permission to worry,
Yeah.
but only during that designated time. It's like putting it on your calendar.
Yes, and the idea is that by containing your worry to that specific time period, you can reduce the amount of time you spend worrying. Throughout the day, you're reclaiming your time and energy.
That makes a lot of sense. What are some other strategies that can be helpful?
Another powerful technique is called challenging your worries, which involves examining the evidence for and against your worries.
Okay.
It's like putting your worries on trial.
So, like, if you're worried about failing a test, you might ask yourself, what evidence do I have that I'm going to fail? What evidence do I have that I might actually do well?
Exactly. And by looking at the situation more objectively, you can often reduce the intensity of your worry. You're bringing in a dose of reality to counter those catastrophic thoughts.
It's like taking the worry to court and forcing it to present its case.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And sometimes the evidence just doesn't support the worry. It's all smoke and mirrors.
And that can be incredibly freeing.
Right.
What a relief to realize that your fears might not be as grounded in reality as they feel.
Exactly. And finally, as we talked about earlier, CBT often involves teaching people relaxation techniques.
Right.
When our bodies are relaxed, it's harder for our minds to race with worry.
Right.
It's about creating a sense of calm and grounding.
It's like hitting the pause button on that runaway train of worry.
Precisely. And by combining these different strategies, CBT can help people regain control over their worry and live more fulfilling lives. They no longer feel like worry is in the driver's seat.
This is so encouraging. Now I'm seeing that CBT also emphasizes the importance of setting realistic goals.
Yeah.
Is that about managing expectations and not aiming too high?
It's not about lowering your expectations,
Okay.
but about making them more attainable and realistic.
Okay.
If our goals are too ambitious or unrealistic, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and frustration,
Right.
which can then lead to negative thoughts and feelings and sabotage our efforts.
It's like setting off on a journey without a map or adequate supplies. You're bound to get lost or run into trouble along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So CBT therapists often work with their clients to break down large goals into smaller, more manageable steps. It's like creating a roadmap for success with clear milestones along the way.
And those smaller steps feel less overwhelming.
Right.
And provide a sense of accomplishment along the way,
Exactly.
which can boost motivation and self-confidence.
Precisely. It's about building momentum and celebrating those small wins, which then fuel the desire to keep going.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching the destination overnight, but about enjoying the journey.
That's such a great reframing. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about problem solving.
Okay.
I know this is a big part of CBT, but can you explain exactly how it works? Is it just about, well, solving problems?
It's more structured than that.
Yeah.
So CBT problem solving typically involves a 5-step process.
Okay. Walk me through those steps.
Sure. The first step is to define the problem.
Okay.
This might seem obvious, but it's important to be specific about what the problem is and what you want to change.
Right.
It's about getting clear on what you're actually dealing with.
So like instead of saying, I'm stressed,
Yeah.
you might say, I'm feeling overwhelmed by my workload and I'm having trouble managing my time effectively.
Exactly. The more specific you can be, the better.
Okay.
It's like setting the target before you aim.
Okay, what's step number 2?
The second step is to brainstorm solutions. This is where you let your creativity flow and come up with as many possible solutions as you can without judging or evaluating them.
Okay.
It's not about finding the perfect solution right away, but about generating possibilities.
So it's about quantity over quality at this stage,
Right.
just letting the ideas flow freely.
Right. It's about opening your mind to different perspectives and approaches.
Okay, what's the third step?
The third step is to evaluate the solutions. This is where you start to look at the pros and cons of each solution and consider which ones are most likely to be effective.
Okay.
You're starting to narrow down the options and get more strategic.
So you're putting on your analytical hat and thinking critically about the feasibility of each option.
Exactly. And it's important to be realistic about your resources and limitations.
Right.
It's no use coming up with a brilliant solution if you don't have the time, energy, or support to actually implement it.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Okay, what's step number 4?
The fourth step is to choose a solution and make a plan to implement it. This involves setting specific goals, outlining the steps you need to take, and identifying any potential obstacles you might encounter along the way.
So you're taking those ideas and turning them into a concrete plan of action.
Precisely. It's about moving from the realm of ideas to the realm of action.
Okay, and what's the final step?
The final step is to evaluate your results.
Okay.
This involves checking in with yourself regularly to see how your plan is working and making adjustments as needed.
Right.
It's about being flexible and adaptable recognizing that things might not always go according to plan.
So it's an ongoing process, not just a one-time fix.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that makes CBT so effective.
Right.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's a flexible and adaptable process that can be tailored to your individual needs and circumstances.
Now, one thing I've been wondering about is the role of homework in CBT.
Yeah.
Is it just about busy work, or is there a deeper purpose?
Homework is an essential part of the CBT.
Yeah.
It's where you take what you've learned in therapy
Yeah.
and apply it to your real life. It's where the rubber meets the road.
So it's like practice.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you'll become in using these new skills.
Exactly. Think of it like learning to play a musical instrument.
Yeah.
You can't just read about it or watch someone else do it. You have to actually pick up the instrument and practice regularly to improve.
That's a great analogy. So what are some examples of CBT homework assignments? What does that look like in practice?
It can vary depending on the individual and the specific problem they're working on.
Right.
But some common examples include keeping a thought record to track your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Practicing relaxation techniques like listening to a guided imagery recording or doing progressive muscle relaxation.
Right.
Trying out new behaviors like facing a fear or engaging in activities you've been avoiding.
Right.
And completing worksheets or exercises to further explore your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
It's all about taking those therapy concepts and putting them into action in your everyday life.
Yeah.
It's where the real transformation happens.
And homework can be incredibly powerful because it helps you see that you can actually make changes in your life.
Right.
Which can be incredibly motivating.
It's like proving to yourself that you have the power to create positive change.
Yeah.
You're not just talking about it. You're actually doing it.
Exactly. It's about building that sense of self-efficacy, the belief that you have the power to make a difference in your own life.
This is also inspiring now, just to play devil's advocate for a moment.
Yeah.
What are some of the limitations of this approach?
Okay.
Is CBT a cure-all?
CBT is a powerful and effective approach for many people, but it's not a magic bullet.
Okay.
It takes time, effort, and commitment.
It's not like taking a pill that will magically make all your problems disappear.
Right. It's about actively engaging in the process and being willing to make changes. It requires a certain level of self-awareness and willingness to challenge yourself.
And I imagine it's also important to find a therapist who you feel comfortable with and who has experience in treating the specific problem you're facing.
The therapeutic relationship is crucial to the success of CBT. You need to feel safe and supported to really dive into those deeper issues.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of CBT now, both how it works and how it can be used to make positive changes. It feels like a real toolbox.
Yeah.
Filled with practical strategies and techniques.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the beginning of your exploration.
Right.
There's so much more to learn and discover.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep learning. But before I get carried away, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be back shortly to wrap up this deep dive and talk about where to go from here.
And we are back, and I am so ready to wrap up our incredible exploration of brief CBT.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that keeps coming back to me is its amazing flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a, one-size-fits-all approach at all.
Yeah, I think that's one of its greatest strengths. It can be adapted.
To fit a wide range of individual needs and circumstances.
Right.
It's not about forcing everyone into the same mold,
Yeah.
but finding what works best for each person.
So it's not about finding the right CBT technique,
Right.
but the right combination of techniques for you.
Exactly.
Almost like creating a personalized recipe.
Exactly. It's like a toolbox filled with various tools
Yeah.
that can be used to create a custom treatment plan.
Right.
And a skilled therapist can help you assess your needs and develop a plan that's tailored to your unique situation.
I can see how that would be invaluable, especially because, let's face it, changing our thoughts and behaviors can be tough.
It is. It takes effort.
Yeah.
But with the right tools and support, it's absolutely possible.
Right.
And that's what's so inspiring about brief CBT. It gives people hope that they can make positive changes in their lives, even if they've been struggling for a long time.
It's not about giving up on yourself or resigning yourself to a life of limitations.
Right.
It's about taking charge and creating the life you want. Yes, and I think, one of the things that makes it so appealing is that it's backed by decades of research.
Right.
It's evidence-based.
Yes.
Practical and empowering. And what's even more exciting is that it's constantly evolving.
Right.
Researchers are always looking for new ways to improve and refine CBT techniques. It's a dynamic and growing field.
Yeah.
which means there's always more to learn and explore.
It's encouraging to know that this approach is constantly being refined and improved.
Right.
It's not about clinging to outdated methods,
Yeah.
but being open to new discoveries and advancements.
Exactly. I think that's a big part of why it's become such a popular and widely used approach.
Yeah.
It's not static.
Yeah.
It's constantly adapting to meet the evolving needs of individuals and society as a whole.
And what's so great is that it can be delivered in various ways. It's not limited to, traditional in-person therapy sessions.
Right. You can do individual therapy,
Mhm.
group therapy, online therapy, which makes it so much more accessible
Right.
to people who might not have access to traditional therapy.
And it's not limited to treating, specific mental health conditions.
Right. It can be used to address a wide range of problems, from anxiety and depression to relationship issues, addiction, chronic pain, sleep problems, and more.
It's really about learning how to manage your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in a way that promotes well-being and helps you live a more fulfilling life.
Both said.
This deep dive has been truly enlightening for me. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on brief CBT and how it can be used to create positive change.
That's great to hear.
If you're intrigued by what you've heard today, I really encourage you to explore CBT further and see if it might be a good fit for you. There are so many resources available, including books, websites, and even apps.
Exactly.
And of course, you can always reach out to a qualified therapist to learn more about how CBT might be helpful for you.
Great advice.
Remember, taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. And brief CBT can be a powerful tool for achieving both.
I think that's a great point. It's about investing in your well-being and equipping yourself with the tools to navigate life's challenges with greater resilience and ease.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into brief cognitive behavioral therapy. We've covered a lot of ground, from the core principles to its diverse applications, and I hope you found this exploration as fascinating and insightful as I have.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep those mental gears turning.